Hello there. Welcome back to Tell Us About, where we bring on interesting people and interview them. Once again, we will be having a Path of Exile portion and then a content creation portion. Tarke in that second portion is going to tell us about what are the logistics of starting your own podcast and why his podcast is more successful than any other podcast for Path of Exile. So, of course, we're joined with TarkeCat. Now, he is not only known for Path of Exile and running the biggest podcast, but he also tells us what the weather is many times. So, of course, we're going to get to that. So, thank you for joining us today, Tarke.
Thanks for having me.
So, let's open with the big question on everyone's mind. What is the weather like today?
Grey, might rain, not raining yet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What before we get into the POE, why did you just start giving us what the weather is like?
I've always had very little respect for my content and my viewers, and I thought, what is the most asinine video I could make? And it was raining outside, and I didn't have an idea of what to do, so I just made a video saying, is it raining outside? And the general reaction was, why are you doing this? And one person said, this really wasn't funny, don't ever do this again. So of course,
you gotta double down at that point, don't you?
Yeah, so I've made like 20 now. But one of the annoying things about it is the weather generally doesn't do very much in the UK. There's this idea that it's always raining and it's always glooming, but we actually have a very mild climate. So I will spend weeks like, do something interesting, and it doesn't. So whenever it does rain, I get quite excited and whip the phone out and stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's that reverse psychology thing, right? When someone tells you you can't do something, especially if it's your content, there's going to be more of it. I'm sorry, guys. So we've learned it here. If you want him to do more trap builds, tell him that he can't do them, okay? Mm-hmm. So
I mean, it's the same reason I got into OnlyFans. People said, Tarke, we don't want to see that. And I said, I'm listening. And, the rest is history.
Did you want to plug your OnlyFans? Where can we find these pics?
I'll drop the link later. It's fine.
Oh, okay. At a later time. Okay, fair enough. So, Tarke, how did you find out about Path of Exile? Why did you start playing it?
So I'd been watching Crip for probably 4 or 5 years before he started playing Path of Exile. I used to be really into World of Warcraft. I played a hunter. He was like the best hunter during like Wrath of the Lich King, so I knew him from those videos. I followed him through WoW into Diablo, and then I had a year of very poor health when I was bedridden, and it was just coincided with him starting to pick up Path of Exile. So I spent just like a year not being able to do literally anything, watching him play PoE, and I thought this is pretty good. I had a background in filmmaking, so I've got a degree in documentary filmmaking. It was during that degree that I took a break from my health. And as a kid, I wanted to be a radio presenter. So I was like, I'm entertaining, or at least I think I am. And I think I could sit in a chair, because I could literally only sit in a chair or lie in a bed. And I had a really old beat-up MacBook that I used for video editing. So I boot camped Windows onto it. And then completely fried it, streaming PoE. But yeah, it was I did my first stream that had like 2 views, and I thought that was awful. So I was like, what can I do to try and like get some attention? And this is like the very start of like beta, open beta. I was too broke to afford the $10 to buy into closed beta, which is ridiculous considering like the amount of money I've wasted on like microtransaction stuff now. But anyway, so as soon as open beta came out, I started streaming it. And yeah, my second stream, I made a post on the forums, because the forums used to be really active then, saying, helping with Path of Exile build, and I just streamed me. We didn't have Path of Building back then, just on the Path of Exile website, the passive skill tree, just making trees on that. And the way that you made a good build back then was just take static blows, iron reflex in every build, and that was a good build. It's like static blows, inner force, iron reflex. So they'd be like, hey, Tarke, I want to make a fireball witch. I'm like, all right, awesome, static blaze. And as long as I took those points...
You're a genius, like, man. You're a genius. How does he come up with these things? My gosh.
It was a revolution. And yeah, I did that for a while. And it was going really well. And every stream was getting like 50 to 100 views, which this is back in 2013 is like a big deal. Because Twitch was really small back then. And there were only like 4 or 5 people even streaming Path of Exile. I remember it was like Crip, Noogie, Gangsta Boo, Dev Moon, and then like one or two others, but it was like teeny tiny. And I was like, Mum, I'm not going to go back to uni. I can see this going really well. This is like a fresh industry. It's just starting. And she said, Jake, fuck off. You're going back to uni. So I did the natural thing. I stuck to my guns and I finished my degree. Uh, yeah. And I came out of university with a lot of debt, hated it. And after a couple more years of poor health, I then got back into content creation. And then I've been making content, be it YouTube or Twitch, full time, whatever that means, since Breach League. Yeah. So it's been a while.
Interesting. What league did you start then, and what sort of game style did you play? Because solo self-found wasn't around all the way back then. Were you a hardcore player starting out?
When
or
I started,
or...
there wasn't leagues, and yeah, I played hardcore trade.
Okay.
So I've kind of played every type of Path of Exile except for softcore trade. I've never played softcore trade. It just doesn't appeal to me. If the meta back when I first started was softcore trade and not hardcore trade, I wouldn't still play Path of Exile. So when I first started, it was something like 70% of the player base played hardcore trade, 30% played softcore trade, and there was quite a lot of like stupid elitism, like, oh, you play softcore, scrubcore, blah 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 blah. I've never played ARPGs for the power fantasy. And I've never been that motivated in just watching numbers go up on a character sheet. I actually, from like a game design point of view, I don't like the concept of levels. I don't like the concept of attributes. I don't like the concept of classes. I think they're archaic, and I think we only have them because of Dungeons and Dragons. I really like Dungeons and Dragons, but that's a side point. So yeah, so I was really into the hardcore trade. I really liked the aspect of the game was much slower back then. You would die, but it wasn't so much kind of like you blinked and you lost everything. And that constant sense of like rebuilding a stash when you get an item, like you upgrade, you keep hold of your second set of gear. How mercantile, that's not how you say that word. But how the trade system used to work and everything, I used to really adore. And I used to primarily play in groups. And we had like a group of like 5 or 6 of us. We had like dedicated traders. One guy whose job it was just go through like the forums every day. I used to do a lot of racing back then as well, and was quite involved. Well, I say involved. We were like on the leaderboard. If you went like page 2, page 3, page 4, like we were there every now and again. We might maybe get to like a top 10 spot or something. But yeah, I did that for a couple of years, and then, well, I did that for like the year that I was bedridden, and then I kind of stopped playing Path of Exile completely when I went back to finish my degree, which was 2 years. And then when I came back, I was still playing hardcore. And yeah, came back in Breach, then played hardcore trade all the way through to around, I want to say it was either Bestiary or Delve. I want to say Bestiary was when SSF became a thing. I then made the swap from trade to SSF. And the reason being is there was a series of race events around Abyss, I want to say. It was like, yeah, Abyss and Harvey called like Mayhem and Flashback and all that. That was like when those first started. And I was racing throughout that entire thing. I got like a top 5 finish, a top 1 class finish. I got my first level 100 in hardcore, which was kind of cool. And it was like a really intense like month of not sleeping, and I hated it. It was like really, it's kind of like, when you meet people and they're like, oh, I'm training for a marathon, and you talk to them and they're like, this was the worst thing ever, but then afterwards they speak really fondly. That's kind of that experience to me. I hated every second of it. It was awful, but I'm glad that I did it. But yeah, that kind of like burned
Yeah, and
me
then
out
here
on the
you are
whole,
right now telling us about how great it was, right?
yeah,
Proving your point,
exactly.
huh?
But that kind of like, it burnt me out on the whole trade thing. So my level 100 in hardcore was a KB miner with like 5 inspired learnings, playing with like curse bots, aura bots, and everything. And it was a mayhem event, so every map had like triple beyond 20 strong boxes. Like the game, it's absolute like clear speed pinnacle, and also like mayhem. When that was with like Abyss and Harvey, the game was very clear speed meta. It was like equip a bright beak, EK Nova every build sort of thing. So yeah, I kind of got burnt on that side of the game, and I tried SSF in Bestiary. I really liked it. I was having, it took me a while to like make that adapt to the, it was because it was such a different playstyle, and then playing in hardcore SSF was a bit rough. And then over the space of a year, I slowly made the transition between hardcore SSF to like a couple of private leagues to then just softcore SSF, and I played primarily just softcore SSF since around about Syndicate League or Betrayal, with one or two like private leagues in between. I kind of enjoy trade in a small private league environment, but even then I feel like I complete my characters too quickly with trade, and without that risk of hardcore with losing your characters, I just can't make it work for me. So yeah, that's why I play SSF.
So you mentioned about you hate the whole class structure, attributes, gear, all that stuff. How far do you generally take your characters on a scale of min-maxed 100% to where you stop, would you say?
That's a really hard. So I haven't really played Path of Exile properly for probably about 2 or 3 leagues. Scourge, I dipped really quickly in. I was very disappointed by Scourge. I liked it initially, but like the way that the league was kind of just abandoned, I found very disheartening. Expedition, I liked from a gameplay point of view, but there was all that mess with all the community stuff, and obviously we did that PR Baeclast with Chris, and that just I was like, after that, I'm like, I just need to like have a break from this game completely for a few months. So the last like 2 leagues I kind of checked out on. Usually it's one of those things of I generally either play like a lot of Corsica or trap builds. Especially when I'm playing Corsica League starts, you generally can do all of the content. Not so much now that I haven't done any of the new Uber content because I didn't really play any of this current league, but like you could see like Maven, you could see Cirrus 8 and all that sort of stuff. With really not that much. And I think Harvest was a really good example of this, because Harvest was when a lot of people first like really got into like the crazy min-max characters. And I was like, okay, so I've seen Cirrus, I've killed Cirrus, I'm running tier 16s, and I haven't got like a double +1 amulet. I haven't got like triple dot multi on every slot. My bow is only a double dot multi +3 bow. But I can do all the content, and I'm doing it fine in an SSF environment. Do I really need an extra 20% more damage? No, because it's like I can do it. And I feel like that's like a big difference when you play SSF or when you play trade or everything, because your priorities swap. So it's one of those things of, if the best way to craft like a bow or an amulet is you get like 5,000 alterations and you just throw them into an amulet, in trade that's easy because it's just you just buy 5,000 alterations. Getting 5,000 alterations in SSF is very difficult. It's not a situation of you just map, because you need to be doing this thing called picking up items and vendoring them to get alteration shards.
Sounds awful.
So,
Sounds awful.
yeah. But I kind of enjoy that in a way. It's like there have been times with certain crafting metas where I've purposely run a lot of delve, and at the end of the delve, I'll turn off my loot filter so I can pick up all the items to vendor, because you can instantly go back and forth to delve. There's not like portals. You can just go back and forth to the minecart. The aspects of that, it sounds awful. That's kind of why I enjoy SSF. I was originally attracted to Path of Exile because of the idea of the journey, and the fact that you were just a character who landed on a beach with a bit of metal strapped to his chest and a stick. Like, that was literally how you started, and it was that slow gain. And I realize that is very much the minority view now, but that's what originally attracted me to the game. If I wanted just like a power fantasy ARPG, I'd play Diablo, because Diablo has better gameplay. So it's not why I play Path of Exile.
Interesting. All right, I think we're throwing out everything that I told you I was going to ask you, and I think we're going to just go over 3 things that I want to unpack that you mentioned.
Okay.
First of all, I hate hardcore because when I die, I lose my mind.
Yeah.
And I don't want to re-level my character. Yeah. So first explain to me, do you hate yourself? Or why would anyone want to play hardcore? Like, explain that to me and what that's like. And then I would like to know about, you said back in the day you used to do the hardcore grouping. How do you deal with that in the context of everyone invested into this one person, now they died? What the heck do you do? People get really mad. Explain that whole thing to me and the grouping and stuff like that.
So keep in mind, I don't play hardcore anymore. Generally, if I want a hardcore experience, I play other games, because I don't feel like Path of Exile is currently conducive to a good hardcore experience. I think Path of Exile has gone so far in the other direction now, where it's like constant zoom meta, league mechanics that requires you to go very fast, which then requires a certain amount of tankiness, which you can still do and you can still have fun in hardcore, but then you're only playing a subset of certain builds. The way that people talk about like what's viable from a softcore trade league point of view, I think is kind of nonsense. There's a lot of options there when you actually look into it. But if you want to do that in hardcore at a top level, then yes, you are limited to, you have to play these ascendancies or these styles of builds or have a very high knowledge level and have like you'll have people who've got so much practice under a boss they can do it in any which way because they can do it with no gear equipped. But yeah, so that aspect of it is a big reason why I don't play hardcore anymore. Also, it's the kind of builds that I enjoy playing. So I used to always only ever play bow builds. That then transitioned to only really playing Corsica. I used to play Corsica and traps. They are builds that you can actually make very tanky, but they're generally on the like slightly squishier side, more evasion style. And so that whole like, well, invasion's great until you get hit. It's perfect. Like evasion is amazing, or at least before the rework when we had the old dodge and everything, evasion was excellent. And I feel like people often thought that evasion was a lot squishier than it was. You could face tank so many things, but you would eventually, you know, once per play session, maybe randomly die. But you can't really afford to do that in hardcore. It was very much just the way the game played back then. Hardcore was very much the intended experience. The devs knew that was the intended experience. They were making it with that playstyle in mind. They've now since shifted away from that. And they've said they don't balance the game around hardcore anymore, which I agree with because it's not what the majority of the play-based plays. As for the group thing, playing in a group makes hardcore way less punishing. The caveat to that, though, is everyone has to be very invested. One of the worst things that can happen is if, and I had this problem with Diablo 3. So I have a lot of my real-life friends, I've tried to get into Path of Exile, but it's just been too complex for them. And when I tried to get them into PoE, it was times when I played hardcore. So a lot of them would they'd maybe try it, maybe get dissuaded when they see the passive tree. And the ones who did get really into it would then die in like Act 3 and be like, oh, wait, I've got to start again. And then they're like, ugh. But I've played Diablo with those guys and they adored it the whole time because when we played Diablo, we played it in softcore. If you have a dedicated group and people are like committed and they will re-roll with you, you die, people can like power level you through certain acts, they can funnel gear to you quite easily. There's something very interesting around that dynamic of, as you said, like, oh, do we put all of our currency into one person? That's a decision. Like, you have to think about, is that worth putting all of our stuff into this, or are we instead better off putting our currency into our support? Because if we funnel it into our support, everyone's survivability goes up. And there's real decisions there. Whereas from a softcore point of view, it's like, no, we just funnel everything into a headhunter, shove it on the carry, go. And those micro decisions are very interesting, and it becomes more like playing like a CRPG and like, how am I going to set up my party? And that element of Path of Exile hardcore is something I do miss a lot. Because then it's very much a group effort. You're making your builds with far more synergy in mind. Like, okay, how can we both... I did a lot of like just duo play and then like full party play, but towards the end it was mostly duo play, and it was really interesting thinking like, okay, how can we... what are the lists of builds? So he might be like, I'm gonna play RF, and then I'd make a list of all the builds I want to then synergize with RF, and then a situation of, okay, but now how are we going to have the same amount of map clear so that we don't get separated? What auras are you going to run that I then can't run? Not just so we kill things harder, but we're both tankier. And that is really interesting, and hardcore promotes that level of thought process that you just don't need in softcore, unless you are like, you know, an MP group doing the most ridiculous content in the world.
So how much prep work do you generally do, or back when you were in hardcore and now, do you do before a league, before you're even going to try something? Because you just mentioned a ton of things there. It seems like a lot of group conversations that had to be had, a lot of things to agree on behind the scenes, and a lot of things to decide of who's running what.
So back then we used to do group stuff. We would probably spend the same amount of time, if not more time, in the planning stage than we would in the playing stage. So like if there was like a weekend race, we would spend the week, like the Monday to Friday, planning for the weekend event. I remember when we did the Mayhem one where I got my level 100, there was like a solid 2 weeks of discussion beforehand, like 4 or 5 hours of build planning every single day, us on Discord calls, working stuff out. And there was also that kind of cool element of because it was that was actually one thing which was really funny about it. So in hardcore, there's this whole kind of thing of what was the big? I remember the cost freeze chest because it gave you additional curse and you could curse through hexproof was a big thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
Our group got a hexproof chest before our competition did. So then it was like, right, do we continue to buy all other cost freeze so they
to
get
deny them? Oh, that's dirty, man.
But
You're
then
playing
they had
dirty.
stuff that we needed. So like, how are we going to handle that?
Okay.
And then it's also that fun thing of because it's hardcore, you get these very predefined, no, screw you, screw me. But then it's like, oh, we've lost our curse guy. We need a curse guy. They have a curse guy, and he's lost his carry. Do we merge the groups? And that was one thing that was really fun, is how the groups started to merge in those barriers, where you'd have these like really strict rivalries would then shrink. Yeah, from a community aspect, hardcore is amazing. And that's another really cool thing as well, is like, you could have a time where you would trade with someone, like you would sell someone like these amazing boots, like the best boots you've got in all league. And then you get a whisper from the same guy, like 30 minutes later, you're trying to buy a gold rim, and you're like, oh, dude. And he's like, yeah. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry, man.
That's funny. Yeah, those dynamics don't happen that often. Mostly, you're very happy when you see that you've got accepted to trade currency in bulk by a bot, because you know that it'll be a pleasant thing. That's what the trade experience like is in softcore right now. It's message, ignore, and then
briefly, that is another big motivation of me going to SSF. Is even it's probably less so now because the hardcore player base has shrunk so much, but then we used to have the same issues with like trade being very frustrating. If you go into SSF, you bypass all of those, and again, if you're doing small private leagues, is you then get really pleasant trade experiences, and that's one of the really cool things about the last private league that I did, like maybe like 1 or 2 years ago now, is when you've only got like maybe 100 people, 200 people, and of that maybe like 50 who are really active, you know what everyone's build is. So when something drops, you're like, this would be great for that guy. And it's like, oh, dude, Mandy really needs that. Make sure you give that for her later. And that aspect of it is really interesting. And yeah, because it's such a small situation, you can't be a jerk when it comes to trading, because people are just like, fine, we're just not going to trade with you anymore. And you had that as well in hardcore. It's like, if
that
you
ever happened to you? Everyone's just like,
no,
Tarke's a dick.
I've never
Screw
been
that
annoying.
guy.
Although saying that, actually, there was one thing which happened in a race. I really needed, I wanted a pair of boots with the leech enchant on them. This was like, I think it was like in Perendus. It was a race that happened in Perendus League. And there was 2 days left on the event, and I wanted them. And the guy wouldn't sell them to me. And I'm like, all right, fine. And I must have done something. I think I like lowballed in his mind. So he then bought every single pair of boots on trade with leech enchant. So every time I went to Whisper, it would just be him. And he would ask the most ridiculous prices. It's like the base boots were probably worth about 30k, and he's like 200c. And I'm like, dude, I'm not giving you 200c. He's like, yeah, but I'm the only one with them.
Yeah, but I bought them all, man, so you're going to pay 200c. You can't have your boots, man.
It was one of those, I'm just like, why? And it went on literally to like the last hour of the race. And I'm like, dude, come on, this ends tonight. He's like, no, if you want these, 500c. I'm like, I'm not paying 500. And he's like, well, if you don't want to pay 500, you should have paid the 40 or like 4 days ago. And I'm like, no.
A true businessman right there. That's what it is. You know, kicking you when you're down. It's 500 now. Oh, wait, you would go for 200? 300 then. Oh, you know what? I ignore those people. I'm like, no, we ain't bartering.
You know, so screw them.
Yeah. If you want to get ignored and you want me to not answer you, try to barter with me. What people don't realize is there's a time commitment to going back and forth with trades, and I'm not going to participate in that. And if you send me, you there after that, I'm blocking your ass. I'm sorry. You there?
That spamming is annoying, but bartering used to be a big thing back in the day, which is what was the appeal of trade. And it was like, as the game sped up, because the game used to be so much slower back then. Like, you had to buy maps because you would never have them.
Yeah.
When everything was so slow, you could spend 10 minutes on a trade. Like, the main way that we used to trade was going on the forums, searching through windows, and being like you would remember people's names because they had shops. So what you would do is you'd collect all the items that you think were good, you'd list them on the forums, and you'd be like, oh, I know that guy always has really good bows. And you look through all these like, oh, he's got some good bows today. and he would be like auction. You'd be like auction till Friday. So then you'd leave like 5 chaos as an offer, and then you'd come back a couple of hours later. Someone's bidded 6. You're like 7 chaos, and it would take like 3 days. He would eventually like agree on whoever the buyer was, and then they wouldn't be online, and then it might be another 2 days
Yeah.
until you actually got the.
Then they quit the whole league, and you never get those things. But you spent 10 days bartering.
But it was, but like that, there was something nice about that, and I understand why Chris now, and this is the problem. It's a different game. It's a completely different game.
Mm-hmm.
So the way trade works now, Super Nintendo Speakers when I play SSF, but like there was something about that I really enjoyed, and as the game sped up, that became less and less viable. I'd be the same thing. Like when I'm blasting through maps when I used to play in trade leagues, I didn't want to, stop what I'm doing for a 1 chaos trade. I definitely didn't want to stop what I'm doing to spend 20 minutes going back and forth on a pair of boots. So the best way to get past all of those issues, play SSF. I don't need to worry. I haven't had a negative trade experience in years. Great.
Well, I mean, my solution is different. Find a friend who will actually do all the trading, and then give them all the crap.
Wait,
And
find a friend. You've already lost like all the listeners.
Well, probably, but different ways to solve different problems. So
True.
it was much more personal. But yeah, like now the big problem is there's so many concurrent people that the trade site cannot even keep up with what's in stock. So it's just an awful experience on the trade end, and they need to do something. I'm not saying necessarily the auction house like I want. They have to do something, because now that becomes a barrier where I don't want to play your game because I have to trade. And that's what gets me to quit most of the leagues, is I no longer want to trade, but I feel like that's the only way I'm going to progress. Like, I want to play maps with the style that I want, but I got to do 8 trades. You know what? I'm going to do something else today. That's what gets me, kind of.
Does it still have the issue where it shows items that sold like an hour ago?
It depends on the league. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You usually have to scroll down to like the 8th page, or you got to list something yourself. God. You list something yourself, and people are spamming you for the next 4 hours. And then you can't actually see real trade. Like, no matter which end you take, it's a raw deal. Okay?
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is their leagues all have timers and stuff on it. You're doing a blight thing, if you leave or whatever, you can't stop in the middle of whatever you're doing and go trade. You started off thing. All that is designed as anti-trade, so like you can't stop. I'm not going to stop in the middle of a rippy map and then now barter with you. It's not going to happen. So
that goes back to my previous point. Like the gameplay was a lot slower, but also we didn't have timed mechanics. It's when it took you 10 minutes to clear a map. There was nothing wrong with like being like, oh, I've cleared this pack. I'm just going to stop what I'm doing and talk to this guy for a bit. There was no like, oh, I've got to chase this delirium fog, or I'm in an Ziri, I'm in an incursion event or whatever. There was none of that. And yeah, the game very much doesn't support that old system. No,
yeah, and like now it might be like, okay, I have a rampage buff and I have headhunter buffs.
Yeah.
My build is garbage unless I have a certain stack of buffs.
Yeah.
If I lead the map with that, I can no longer clear said map, and I invested 2x into it or something is the softcore thing. So I'm not going to go barter with you. I'm not even going to leave my map, and I can't even message you until afterwards. And yeah, it's just an awful experience. I don't have a solution there. I'm just telling you from my perspective.
I do.
Like,
Play
that's
SSF.
I don't know how that solves it. Then I have other problems, like you just said. James, farm 5,000 alterations. No thanks, sir. No thanks. From my perspective, at least. So you mentioned before, in the last couple leagues, you haven't played the game properly. What is the proper way to play this game? Because I think there's multiple, and I think everyone has a different opinion on that.
So this is quite a controversial take. So for the last 2 leagues, I played.
Do it, man. Give me that clip. Let's hear it.
I played until I stopped having fun, and then I stopped playing. I think that's the secret that a lot of players aren't aware of. That is when you notice
you can do other things when you're done.
Yeah.
Wait, no.
When you notice, like, hang on, this is still fine, but I could be having more fun playing something else. You just play something else, right? Like, it's just, there's a scale to it. I feel like a lot of people get stuck in this thing where it's like they'll play past the point of enjoyment, and that doesn't mean that they're not having fun, but it's the difference between going on Netflix and watching a film and being gripped and then just leaving a show you've watched 1,000 times on in the background. And I feel like for a lot of people, that's kind of what Path of Exile's become. Is there are moments where it's really gripping and they're really enjoying, but for a lot of people, it's just that thing that I do to make 5 hours disappear. And yeah, in recent leagues, something that I've been trying to make a real conscious effort of is when I feel like PoE's starting to shift into that thing, which is like it's still fine, like I still enjoy it because I like Path of Exile, but it's just becoming a passive time sink. I think, is there something else I could do that I would either enjoy more or be more beneficial? Like I've been getting into game dev stuff. It's like, all right, instead of doing this, I'll spend 4 hours like following Godot tutorials and do that instead because there's more reasons to do that. And yeah, it's one of those things of I spoke about this recently in a video. I'm in a position with my job that obviously I will play and I will talk about every single Path of Exile league. So if there's ever a league where I'm kind of like, I feel like I've experienced it and it's then just falling into that time waste, not time waste, but just time filler. There's no reason for me to spend another 500 hours because I'm going to play the next league. Like, I'm going to be back, you know. It's not like this is the only time I'm ever going to play Path of Exile. It's not like a MMO expansion launch where it's like, you have to play now. Especially since I play SSF, there's no sense of I have to get to maps day one so that I can farm this boss so I can sell this thing. It's very liberating. And I think that's a very big difference between my content and a lot of other content creations is I've reached a point now where I'm quite happy to sacrifice, like, I very rarely make build guides. I think would be a good example. That was something I realized very early on, that build guides are boring to make from my point of view. It's like the least enjoyable thing. It's the best thing to do if you want to get clicks and views, but I just personally don't enjoy it. So I just stopped doing it. So it's like now when a new league comes out, I'll be like, this is what I'm going to play. This is my reasoning for playing it. Here are a few couple of options. But I actually make a real conscious effort not to put out like proper path of buildings. I put out like skeletons of builds, and I kind of my hope is that if someone wants to play it, they'll take the skeleton, think about it themselves, and then adapt it to their needs. Because that's what I've always kind of done, is I've looked at what other people do and go, how can I make that suit me? And I think that one of the big, not necessarily issues, but I think a big limiter of people's fun is they're always just replicating rather than thinking. And for me, thinking is the fun bit.
Yeah, so back to the planning then, with you mentioning that, which was more fun from you, planning out the build or actually playing the game? Because for me, it's more planning the stuff.
Yeah,
and then I get to the point, see it together, and then I'm over it and ready to move on to the next thing. Are you similar to that?
That was actually another big thing which happened to me a lot in trade. Is it's like I would do what everyone wants to do on my league start character. I would get the league like sussed out. I'd build up my stash, and then I'd spend a couple of days planning my second build, and then I'd buy all of the gear. I would get my second build to maps. I'd equip all the gear. I'd run like 2 maps. I'm like, oh cool, it works. And then I'm like, right, let's plan a new build, because that wasn't like, once you know it works, it's like it's good. It's like, all right, cool, you know.
Yeah, I do all the bosses on the right. I'm ready to move on. And then I've been thinking like, do I need to be the one that levels the character and tries it? Maybe I just give the POB to someone else and they do it, and I'll still be able to get my dopamine hit. Maybe I just theory craft and I don't play the game at all. That was a thought that occurred to me recently, which I might try out if I get volunteers that want to level. So.
I, as a joke, I remember this really vividly on the stream, like 5 or 6 years ago. I was saying someone should make an ARPG which is all about botting, and the idea is you just try to make the best bot, because everyone has the most fun planning. The gameplay, like, who cares, right? So it's just a thing of you try to just make the most efficient character, and the gameplay, it's like an auto battler where it's just like PoE, but everything's an auto battle, and I think that'd be an interesting thing. But I've got a good anecdote on that. So when GGG flew me to New Zealand for ExileCon, I got to go to the studio, and I went to the studio. I was talking to Chris, and he was like, "Oh, do you mind playing Path of Exile mobile, like demo thing, and just give me your thoughts on it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I played it. I was there with Octavian, and we were playing it with his name's escaped me, sorry, but the guy who's like in charge of the mobile port. And we were playing it, and they're like, "What do you think of it?" And I'm like, I mean, it's fine, like the gameplay's good, but I don't play Path of Exile for the gameplay. It was also put earlier like Diablo. I've always played Path of Exile for the items and the planning. So when the mobile is literally just mapping, like that's all it is currently. They might have changed it. There's no need for me to play that because it's just like that's not why I play PoE. I've never played PoE for that reason. Again, it goes back to what I was originally saying. I used to play it for the journey, and the journey used to be you're this like guy who's super weak and the game's really slow and everything is a constant struggle. Now the journey is it's that SSF, it's the building of the stash, it's that planning phase. The actual like execution, give or take, that planning though, that's what I find really fun.
Yeah, so I'll segue that a little bit into they're basically starting to rework the axe and update those monsters. My point of view kind of that thing is a lot of the supports aren't that flashy early on. I don't feel like I play the game until I get to about maps and have my ascendancies and stuff like that. Now I understand that could be different from a newer player. What are your thoughts on that, considering that you gave feedback about the mobile? Do you think they're wasting their time trying to revamp all the acts and make them a little bit more difficult, or
I like the harder acts. If it was a situation of, and again, I'm talking purely from my point of view, I'm not saying this is good for the game. I am vastly aware that the vast majority of players find the axe the least enjoyable bit, and from their point of view, it's like you're just making the bit of the game I don't like more tedious. I completely understand that.
that's where I'm sitting. But yeah, what's your opinion? Because
and I completely understand this is a minority opinion. I'm talking purely from my point of view. I quite enjoy leveling. I quite enjoy leveling new characters. I don't rush. For me, league start scenario leveling, again from that SSF thing, probably the average time it takes me to get characters and maps for like 6 to 8 hours. If I'm doing, I will often do like the league mechanic in every single zone. If it's something which takes more time, like Expedition did, then it might be 10 hours. Second character of the league, probably the same thing. I generally purposely kind of give myself a bit I like to level as the build that I'm playing. I don't do the scenario of like, okay, I want to play this build, so I'm going to use Stormblast Mine till this level to then power get there.
Your camera froze. Okay, we're good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I try and focus on the journey, and yeah, if I played in Trade League, completely different scenario. But with the SSF thing, I try and make the most of it. I think that making anything you can do to make the content more engaging is a good thing. That being said, like if they could just snap their fingers and like boom, all the acts are more interesting for me, I'd personally prefer it. I don't really understand why they're doing it from the point of view of they're currently working on Path of Exile 2, which is a brand new campaign. Now, they keep saying that Path of Exile 2 is going to come out next year. I don't believe that. I wouldn't be surprised if Path of Exile 2 didn't come out until 2024, 2025. I've always thought that one of the best and worst things about GGG is their ambition. Their ambition is why it even exists. It's why they come up with these amazing things, but it's also why they often bite off more than they can chew, and a lot of the leagues launch like half fleshed out because there was too much scope. It was like, you should have dialed this in. There wasn't enough focus. And from that point of view, when I'm on the point of view of kind of like, I feel like they struggle with scoping out their stuff and trying to cram too much into a league, then reworking the acts which are going to be replaced seems odd to me, especially if their projected timeline of like they keep saying we're going to get meaningful PV2 stuff by the end of this year. If that's true, I don't see why we're investing in these acts. If it's a situation of it's more like what I think, or it's going to be like 2025, then yes, make these acts more interesting. That's more so my point of view on it.
Yeah, so one of the ways that I think that they could make it more interesting for me or to care about it would be that I can actually use my intended skill while I'm leveling and not have to pick like one or two viable ones where I can't use my skill until later. This is a huge problem for me, at least. Do you feel that way or no?
No, but that's because my idea of viable and your idea of viable are very different.
Okay. Because you take your time and sometimes you're over leveled and stuff like that, where it's less of a big deal.
It's the point of view of it's kind of I very recently did some like Scourge Arrow Poison leveling. And that was purely because I decided I want to play Poison Scourge Arrow. Now, leveling that as poisonous concoction would have been significantly faster. It would have been a better build. It would have been a better build to play endgame compared to Scourge Arrow, but I decided I want to play Scourge Arrow. It's the same reason why I played Traps for as long as I did, or Caustic Arrow as long as I did. Caustic Arrow has been in a very comfortable spot for a very long time now. That it's just very worked and is now one of the, like, fun enough, one of the best leveling builds if you're going down that kind of route. But it's like, I played Traps when they were the best build, I played Traps when they were the worst build, because I enjoy that playstyle. So if I'm like, I want to play a Lightning Trapper, I will level as Lightning Trap. If I want to play Explosive Trapper, I'll play Explosive Trap leveling. If it's better to do Stormblast Mines, or to do Orb of Storms, or Frostbomb Memes, or whatever, then great, but like that's not the build I decided to play. I'm quite lucky in the fact that a lot of the builds that I typically enjoy, they get their strength from gem leveling, like gem scaling, so they tend to be quite consistent. So it's not a situation of, I'm trying to think what the absolute worst leveling build would be. I don't know, someone be like, oh, I want to play Heavy Strike, so they level as Heavy Strike, you know, without any like melee slash whatever. Yeah, that would be pretty bad. But yeah, I've just been fortunate that the builds that I want to play, even if they are suboptimal, they're not so unbelievably suboptimal that I'm pulling out nails, you know.
Okay, that makes sense. So in general, are you like, I want to play that skill and I'm going to make it work regardless because it seems like a good skill and I like that style? That's how you approach it?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I feel a little bit like pressured sometimes to choose what I think is widely appealing to the audience so that I can make build guides off of that, such that it's will get views and get people excited. And I know that sometimes if I go down the road, which I have, of stuff that I want to, then I know that like it's super niche or it's super expensive and it's fun to me, but other people aren't going to like that as much. And I actually got myself in a little bit of trouble recently with that because I made an auto bomber just to farm tier 3 towers that did it really well, but it was really, really expensive overkill. But I wanted to do it, and I tried to preface that as much, but a lot of people are like, well, I can't do tier 16s or whatever. And so you fall into that trap a little bit as a content creator, or at least I'm starting to, and I'm trying to decide, do I care about that? Do I not care about that? Am I going to do what's fun? And it's did you ever have that? Or
so it circles back to what I was saying about when I realized like I didn't want to make build guide content, and that was exactly that problem. So I've played Path of Exile since 2013. I've played pretty much every style of build that is to play. And people are like, but you only play traps and you play Caustic Arrow. It's like, yeah, because after 8 years of playing, I realized that's the playstyle I enjoy the most. I think it's no different to someone like Alkaiser only playing melee, like only playing Cyclone or whatever. He was like, okay, I've played all these builds, that's what I enjoy in this game, so I'm just going to play that. So I've made the same build every single league, you know. Every league I will play a trap build, every league I'll play a Caustic Arrow build. That's why I often get excited by patches that really change how you play, because I'll often try and be like, I'm going to play the same build every league, but I'm going to try and play it differently. So I'm never doing like an exact 1-to-1 sort of thing. And that's been very liberating in that sense. It's very much to the detriment of my channel, but for my enjoyment of the game, it's better. I think generally as a content creator, you need to pick one of two things, and you have to make the decision, and then once you make the decision, you're like, okay, I'm happy because I made the decision. You decide, am I doing this for business reasons? In which case you have a mindset like Mathel and you're very disciplined and you're like, no, I stream every single day, I put out this many videos a week, this is what I do, and you just look at it from like, comparing my job to my mate's job, my job is more fun, I'm doing this from a business point of view, this is what it is. Or you go, am I going to be more selfish with it? I mean, not even selfish, but am I going to be more maybe self-indulgent? And is my approach going to be my enjoyment of the game? And I will play whatever gives me the most personal enjoyment, and when my enjoyment wavers or tempers, I go do something else. I've very much gone that route, to the detriment of my channel, I'm very aware of that, but it's one of those things of, I can just about pay my rent every month, and it works. So I'm like, you know what, it's fine. Nothing's broken yet. I'm just gonna go for that kind of way, and yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. You got to choose something, right? It's your content at the end of the day, and it's your life to live, right? So you got to
exactly.
do whatever you're comfortable with, more so.
Yeah.
I want to get back to something that you kind of mentioned before, that you aren't too worried about the builds because well, it'll be there later for the next one. And I
Hmm.
think this is one of the very confusing things for me, which I kind of don't understand, is sometimes they nerf builds where you only could try it for one league, and if you didn't, you
Hmm.
feel like you missed out. And the same
Yeah.
goes with mechanics, like Scourge might just vanish. Original synthesis might just vanish. And there's like two. GGG says, well, these temp leagues are supposed to be not really the main game, but standards the main game. But most people play the leagues, so I think that's misleading because I think the leagues kind of are the main game, and then it actually a lot of them it doesn't get rolled in. That's like, what do you think about that dynamic? Is that confusing to you too? Do you think that's at odds? What thoughts on that?
Um, I definitely had like FOMO, fear of missing out, when it comes to like missing out on certain builds because of the way I decide to play the game. Again, it's one of those things of it's more of a softcore trade issue than a SSF issue, because in SSF it's one of those things of you pick the build you want to play, and then maybe like, oh, I happen to drop a cost breeze. Oh, I guess I'll play that. Um, Less so than unless there's like a certain div card or you have a certain strategy. You're not like, oh, I'm going to play a build with 5 voices and a this, because you just don't have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that again is a decision. It's like the people who play SSF, I can't speak for everyone, but it's like, do you want to focus more on the journey because you enjoy the journey, or do you want to focus more on playing with every single unique and loads of really wacky builds? In which case, you probably shouldn't be playing SSF. You're probably playing trade. But saying that, like, if you actually just play a lot, you get access to everything anyway. If you go and look at like the top accounts on PB Ninja and the SSF trade leagues, you'd be amazed by the gear that they have. But that's a side point. Um, I generally wish that GG be slightly more consistent. I really don't like the thing they've been doing recently of mid-league nerfs. I think mid-league nerfs are very bad because then it can have that scramble effect of, oh, this seems really strong. Do I invest everything into this now so I can play it before it gets too popular? But then what if I invest everything into it and then it gets deleted? Or do I have to invest everything into it now so I can experience it before they delete it in a week's time? And that is something I really don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I can understand from that point of view, but
But
I've
not only
again I
that, of if they're going to nerf it mid league, but by the end of the league too. Like, okay,
yeah,
GGG thought
no,
it was too
of
strong,
course.
and it will never be in that state again, and it will never be viable again, and you never got to experience that.
Yeah, there are builds I've missed out on. I always use dart packs as an example. Launch dart packs, and we had the instant vol packs, with like Berserker, Spell Leech, and stuff. I was playing a Magma Orb build that league. I think it's like 98 in hardcore. I was having a lot of fun with it, and I was like, oh, that seems cool. I'll play that next league. And then they just were like, nope, psych, and they completely changed how the leech mechanic works, and then you just couldn't play Dart Pack that way ever again, and then it was only you play it with skeletons if you want to play it or put it on a totem. So there've been times where like I've missed out, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap up this segment for the Path of Exile. We're going to continue this on and talk about content creation, and we're going to talk about podcasts and the logistics of that. So let us start with why did you hit the record button to begin with, man? How did you get into content creation? Tell us about that journey.
So I wanted to get into radio presenting as a child. All I used to do was listen to talk shows. I was always that kid who would ask why. I was just curious on how things worked, and I liked talking.
Why, Tarky?
I
Why?
Well, exactly. I think because I'm insufferable and I don't have friends and I struggle to connect with people. So if you have a podcast, you force people to sit with you for a prolonged period of time, and you can get that social feedback.
Why?
Um,
Okay, I'm gonna stop that shit and
yeah.
lose. We'll take the okay.
But yeah, so that was a big thing of trying to get into it, and also it was mental stimulation. So like I went to art school. I've got an art degree. I was raised by my single mum because she was an artist. I used to go into like university. She was doing a master's while I was in school, and her school would run after mine, and her university was just around the corner from where my school was. So I would finish my classes, walk around, and I'd sit into her seminars. So I was in that like very stupid art crowd, but why is the world like this? And you know, I was into that from a very young age, and that kind of changed how I thought about things, and that's how I like to communicate about stuff. So I was very much always quite tapped into it. So then when I first started messing around with content creation, I thought this is something I'm good at. I was always trying to look at, well, what can I do which is a bit more interesting in my mind, at least, than just, hi guys, TarkeCat here with build guide 387, because that's the least enjoyable aspect of Path of Exile. The Path of Exile content I enjoy making the most is the why have these design decisions been made this way, and then seeing how my point of view compares to other people, and that was the big like idea behind Baeclast. So that's been running for 5 years now, and while I like to give Rise a lot of shit, because Rise is the most annoying person in the world to schedule, because he is useless at replying to messages, he's, you know, without him, it wouldn't have lasted this long. So the way it actually started was both Rise and myself were guests on the same episode of State of Exile. State of Exile was like the Path of Exile podcast in the early days. It was like Xenocide Genius, Ziggy D, and then they had like Pox on there sometimes. They had like a rotating cast, but it was like the thing. I think it was like the first like proper Path of Exile podcast. And we were both the guests on it, and we'd never interacted before, but we got on quite well. And even though we played the game very differently, we had very similar views, and we thought in a similar kind of way. There was then a Path of Exile meetup in Berlin, just maybe a month or two after that. And I spent quite a lot of time hanging out with Rise there, and I was like, dude, I think we got on really well. We should like talk more and do like a podcast or something. And he was like, yeah, whatever. He's even said like he just thought I was some new upstart who wouldn't even be streaming in a week's time sort of thing. So he was just like, yeah, whatever. Like this guy seems, you know. And funnily enough, that whole conversation took place while Ziz was projectile vomiting in the background. So we were in a bar, and if there's one thing that anyone who's ever been to a convention will realize, is that a bunch of nerds who don't do much physical activity aren't in the best shape, and they generally don't drink very much. So when they're then in a position to drink with other people, they go way too hard because they think that they're still them at like 15 or something. So we were in this bar, and we were just having drinks, and at some point someone was like, oh, do you want to get shots? And I'm like, yeah, right. So Ziz had a shot and just instantly just vomited down the entire bar, like across the entire bar. The bar staff weren't very happy about that, for very obvious reasons. So me and
they weren't like, do more of this?
They weren't pleased by that, no. So me and Rise rushed him into the bathroom, and there was just this like prolonged like 15 minutes where he was trapped with me while we were. So Ziz is like just vomiting in the toilet. Me and Rise are trying to make sure he's not like drowning or something. So I was just pitching Baeclast to him then, and he couldn't really escape. He couldn't be like, oh, I'm just going to leave you with the guy dying on the floor, you know.
So you took that opportunity. You're like, you know, I
went with it. You know?
I could look after Ziz, or I could pitch to raizqt for 45 minutes because he cannot leave.
Exactly. So I probably should thank
Ziz for this. That opportunity.
Yeah. So I'd previously had quite a few conversations with Yoji. Yoji was one of the first guys who like found my stream. He was like a very big motivator. He was very supportive. It was funny. I've always been a massive Kripparrian fan, and Yoji found like one of my first videos, and he made a video shouting me out, and he didn't know I was a massive Crip fan, and he said, I get real Crip energy from this guy. And to me, that was like the biggest compliment ever. And we'd spoken about doing a podcast together, and we'd actually recorded like a demo that never got uploaded. And so when it came to forming Baeclast, it's like,
wait, a demo? Well, what's a demo? Like a song?
It's like a pilot episode. No, we recorded an episode, and it just timeline stuff. It just never really got uploaded. You know, anyway. So yeah, when it then came to forming Baeclast, Yoji was an obvious shoo-in. And of the original lineup, Ziggy was part of the original lineup, but then he went away a bit, then he came back. But like Rise has been there the whole time, the whole 5 years. He's only ever missed like 2 episodes or something. But yeah, so how did I get into the podcast side of content creation? Nerds not being able to handle their drink and being an opportunist.
But you had the idea. How'd you even get the idea before that?
That sounds to collapse.
No.
You're thinking that's a
Okay,
bad sound.
you know, I told you could cut things out of this, but that's not getting
okay.
cut. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry. But before you had the whole plan, how did you sit down and come up with a plan? How many people were you gonna have on the podcast? Walk us through all that stuff, or that just kind of happened as you found more talent. You're like, you know what, this interaction's gonna be good because you've settled now on the same like 5 people, right?
Yeah. So, funnily enough, when me and Rice first started talking about it, we were like, we want like. Originally, our goal was to get someone from every aspect of the game. So we wanted to have a voice for the casual hardcore guy, which was me, the more experienced hardcore guy, that was Rise, and then like a more casual and more experienced softcore player. We had Yoji, who'd be like the more casual softcore player. We also very much wanted to nab Noogie and Moors. I watched a lot of Moors' content. Moors was another person who championed my content a lot starting out. I watched Noogie for years. I was a big fan of him previously from like Diablo stuff. Noogie and Rise being close friends. And Rise knew that Noogie and Moors had always talked about doing a podcast together. And we were like, hey, we're starting this thing, do you want to join it? And they were like, no, but we'll actually, it was like us asking them about it was the motivation for them to start Coffee Talk, which was a really good podcast and not enough people know about. That went on for a couple of years until Moors like kind of left content creation behind. So that was kind of one of the funny things when then Noogie ended up rejoining the fold because it was someone that we wanted from the very start. But yeah, so we had a very wide lineup originally. We had, I think it was, hang on, Rise, Yoji, Ziggy, Cute Dog, me. Am I missing someone? I feel like I'm missing someone. But anyway, there was a lot of us. And over the years, people came in, people came out. I liked bringing guests on a lot, but I quickly realized that, and this is why I think this is why I think Baeclast lasted for so long in comparison to a lot of other podcasts, which weren't necessarily like bad. I think there have been loads of really good podcasts, in some ways much better than Baeclast, who just didn't last because they were too focused on like, oh, constantly bring on new guests, or constantly doing this, or constantly doing that. The problem you have with that is that even if you have like the set 5 people that you bring on every single episode, organizing streamers is awful because streamers are generally useless. That's a big reason why streamers stream, is because they're useless and they can't do anything else in life. So when you're then trying to juggle people who are flaky and then bring on new people, it made that aspect of running Baeclast very tedious and very frustrating. So I decided, like, okay, I want to focus on just getting a core lineup of people that I gel really well with, who we have really good conversation, and we're just going to build our chemistry, and that's just going to be it. Every now and again, we might bring on a guest, be it, I never thought we'd get GGG devs, but that's quite a common occurrence. But I was like, when there's like a particular topic where there's something really specialist, we might bring someone on. But otherwise, this is just our lineup, we're going to stick to it. And one of the funny things about that, and I've had a lot of people who run other podcasts tell me, because we were so like selective or like not inclusive, that made other people make their podcasts because they wanted guests. I've had this conversation with Balamage, Catmaster, Pie by Pie. I've had this conversation with Ziz a couple of times. Yeah, that was a big reason, not necessarily why others started, but I feel like in a similar way to how me and Rise approaching Noogie and Moors was kind of the final kick they needed to do their thing. And I think that's one of the really good things about content creation, and even with what you're doing now, is seeing where you think there's a hole and being like, I want to watch a kind of content that isn't out there, I'm going to make it. And I think that's the most important thing. There's a type of content that you enjoy that you feel like isn't being serviced, just make it.
Yeah, exactly. I either want to do that or give people the push to, that are right on the edge to say, no, start your podcast. Do it.
Yeah.
I'll watch it. I'll plug it. I'll even plug it for you. Just do it. I want to see I want to consume that content. I don't necessarily need to be a part of it. I just want to see that content, please. Yep. So there's some of that stuff, and that's kind of why, like I told you earlier, that I'm doing this, is I want to sit down with these people and extract things that people are like, well, it's not a big deal at all. And I'm sitting there like, well, this is a really big deal to me, and surely someone else probably thinks it does too. It's just because of your perspective, you don't think it is. So how did you get involved with GGG to the point where you were able to bring them onto the show? Did you reach out to them? They reached out to you? It just developed over time. What happened there?
I first reached out to Chris himself in 2013, asking for an interview when I first started streaming, which was quite ballsy. And I got a very polite message from his wife at the time.
Who is like, you're not worth our time. You'll probably be gone in a week.
It was
just like Rise thinks while
Chris's,
Ziz is puking.
It was like Chris is very busy. That like Baeclast then started like 2 years after that. This was like literally my first stream. So yeah, I had a degree in documentary filmmaking. I made films interviewing artists. I'd always wanted to do that. Originally I was like, I want to be the guy who interviews content creators. I want to make a documentary on.
Are you still in my idea? But 10 years ago, is that what you're doing?
Basically, yeah. You're not original. It's someone.
Oh, not original. Darn it! Someone told me I was original, and that went to my head. And now I know you're lying because I'm always original. So
yeah. So I once sent a treatment to Athene because I was fascinated by Athene because I was like, this man is insane. And I was right. But I sent a treatment to his manager, like, dude, could be a really good documentary made. And then, funny enough, they made their own documentary.
Yeah, they made their own. Yeah.
But anyway, so I first reached out then. I've always kind of been of the point of view of just like, it's better to just make the punt and see what happens. It was like, again, if I didn't originally have that thing with Rise, I'm just like, hey, I'm a nobody, but like, what do you think? It wouldn't have ever happened. So I originally asked, nothing happened or whatever. I slowly became quite close friends with Bex, who's the community manager for GGG. I can't remember how we originally started talking.
It wasn't over drinks and Ziz wasn't puking in the background?
No.
Not for that one. No catalyst Ziz in this one.
No. I can't remember originally how it even started. We just started chatting a lot. And I think this was a big difference between why we became friends compared to like a lot of other people is like, I think it was originally I might have needed like art assets or something. I think that might have been the original reason. I was like, hey, can I get access to some like press package or something? But then we just started chatting about random stuff, and it's like 95% of our conversations are nothing to do with Path of Exile. So it was then one of those situations of like, okay, Tarke's been running this podcast for a while. We've worked with Ziggy a lot. We've worked with other people on the podcast a lot. I can vouch that he's not a complete dickhead. We can probably trust them to do some interviews. So I think I could be wrong in this. I think originally the idea was like floated to me of like they would maybe be up for doing an interview. And then I was like, yes. And I like really chased it. And then we had one and it went well. And then it would be like a rotating thing of like, a new league come out of like, hey, could we get one? Sometimes they ask me. Now it's a situation more so of they'll ask me, like, we would like to do, like, when the 315 thing happened, they approached us. I didn't approach them. General situation again, they approached Baeclast, like, we would like to talk about this. We feel like we've got something important to say. And I'm like, yeah, let's try and work it out. Currently, I'm trying to work out if we can get an interview for mid 317. That is one of the annoying things about the way they've changed their announcement schedule. So they used to announce the league, then launch 2 weeks later. Now they do a 1 week one. Since they've done that swap, it's much harder to do interviews unless you're part of the actual league announcement itself, which we've done twice, I think. But yeah, obviously, like the big real highlight of that was when they asked me to go. They flew me down to New Zealand. They asked me to like host the opening ceremony thing with Ziggy and Crep, and that was really cool. Because when I first
for Exile Con, right? About that,
when I first started content creation, I had a list of 3 people that I'm like, if I could ever work with these 3 people, I'm like set. And it was Creparian, Preach, and Rectful. Obviously, sadly, with what happened to Rectful, that's never gonna happen. But yeah, I got to be part of the like opening warm-up thing with Creparian in person, which was really surreal. And then I recently had Preach on Baeclast when he did his blind Path of Exile thing recently, so that was very, very cool.
I'm gonna ask you a question, and I did actually prep you for this one. So I reached out to you like twice, and you talked to me both times.
Yeah.
And both times you're massive compared to my following, my clout, and everything. Why did you actually answer me?
I generally, I'm setting myself up here. People say he didn't do it for me. I generally try to answer everything. There are some things I miss. I feel really bad as a lot of the hideout people reach out to me when there's like a competition because they know that I'm really into hideouts and I
Mm-hmm.
don't follow up with everything. I can't, but I try to. And I think it's very important that if you can do something, if you think someone's got good intentions, you should support them with it. That's always kind of been my thing. The way that Octavian first got involved in Baeclast, he was just starting. His channel was very, very small. And he sent me a message on Discord saying, hey, I think I've got something interesting I could offer as a guest on Baeclast once. Could I come on for an episode? And he was just very upfront about it. I think that's the main thing. It was kind of the same thing with when you messaged me. Is it wasn't a thing of like, hey, Tarky, how are you doing? And then like this fake chatting the shit for like a couple of hours. Then, by the way, I need something. Whenever someone tries to do that, I generally don't follow through with it. But if someone's upfront and be like, hey, I've got this idea, and I'm like, I think that's neat. I'll do my best to support it. So yeah, you sent a good message. I thought that would be fun for me to do it. I would like to support that. I would like to enjoy watching that content. So I was like, I'll come on.
Yeah. And of course, I told you the intended audience for this is people who are going to make content creation and stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are scared to ask for collabs or for anybody to ask. So, what are the rules of thumb for someone who's going to approach you? What do they have to do? And what can they do wrong that there's no way in hell they're getting an answer for you? Can you share that?
I think the worst thing, and this has happened a lot, me and Rise talking about this quite a lot, is you'll get someone who's like completely new to the scene and they'll make a video and they'll send you the video and they're like, hey, I really respect your stuff. Do you mind watching this and giving me feedback? And I'm like, all right, cool, I'll watch it. I'll give them the feedback, and then they'll argue with the feedback. That is a big no-no. Never do that. There's nothing more frustrating than when someone's like, hey, I really respect your opinion. Please give me your opinion. You give your opinion, and they're like, I disagree with your opinion. It's like, well, then why did you ask me? Because what often tends to happen is you'll get a kind of person who does that. They message everyone. There was one time, this was a couple of years ago, well, I was chatting to Rise off stream or something, and I was really annoyed that this had happened. Because it was a really long video, and I'd put a lot of time and energy into the feedback. The whole process probably took like 2 or 3 hours, which isn't that much time, but it's enough time, you know. And he'd done the exact same thing for the same dude, and the exact same thing had happened, and we didn't know that we were chatting about the same guy.
On the exact same video, this guy just wanted everyone to watch his. See, that was his marketing strategy for the video. That was all of his views, man.
What often happens is, and I completely understand it, is with content creation, you're putting yourself out there, and that is very difficult. And so it's very easy to get defensive, and I can get quite defensive. Generally, what irritates me is, I'm going slightly off topic, but like when I tend to get defensive, it's because I realize they've not read the video how I intended, either through I've had poor messaging or they've just not listened. That's one of the most frustrating things. There's been a few times where I've made a video where I feel like my intention with the video is very clear, and it's like, it's clear what I'm saying, and people will wildly misinterpret it. It's actually a big reason why I hate, the worst thing that would ever happen to me is if I saw one of my videos on Reddit. I would hate it, because every time I'm like, oh no. I recently, for example, made a video talking about like the memory game thing in Maven. And it was like quite a philosophical game design kind of a video. And a lot of people will watch that and be like, I get what he's saying, but some people will be like, I don't get what he's saying, but we can say that he's saying this, post it on Reddit, people don't watch the video, and they're like, oh, I can't believe he would say that. This guy's a fucking moron. And I've had...
That's how content creation works, man. You gotta milk that shit. Some people need 10 hours worth of content, bro. They're gonna milk the shit out of that. They're gonna put words in your mouth. That's that whole ecosystem as well.
I can be quite flippant in how I talk, so it's one of those things of... I'm aware that I can make quite bad first impressions, so it can be quite frustrating sometimes where I'm kind of like, I can see this person's image of me, because that's why he's saying this. Okay, actually, I'll give you the best example. The best example I have of this was, it was one of my first Path of Exile videos which went really big. and it was called Path of Exile Doesn't Make Sense, or like why Path of Exile doesn't make sense. And one of the examples I used was Restoration was one of the best support gems for Burning Arrow, because the way that double dipping used to work and the way that scaling, and it didn't make any sense. And there was one guy who hates me now because of that video, because he thought that I was purposely going onto the Path of Exile wiki, deleting obscure information so that I could then use it in my videos for views. And he was kind of like, why would this be a video? If you really cared, you would just put this on the wiki. And now whenever I do anything on anything, that guy will be there like, this guy is, and that is one of the frustrating things. So to bring it back, yeah. So when you're a small content creator and you reach out to someone big, I can understand that thing if it's like it's a personal thing of like, oh, they're saying that I'm stupid or I'm wrong. It's really not that.
Yeah, you could crush them with one thing, and that's one thing that, like, I've only been making content for a year and a half, and then I don't know how much I mean to some people, and then I realize it later. And if you say something like that, you could entirely crush someone. I'm like, oh, well, I just was saying I slightly disagree, not that I crushed your show. Yeah, that I wanted to crush your show.
You shouldn't be like, I think you're an absolute moron. I can't believe you made this video. Like, if someone's talking to you like that, then don't listen to them. But if someone's like, I'm not sure if this is the best way of presenting, or I don't entirely agree with your points, then take it on. So I'd say that's 1. 2, I think it's always very important just to be really upfront. I take this to an extreme. I know I'm a lot less forgiving of this than other people, but I cannot stand it when someone reaches out to you and then it's very clear that the reason they reached out is because they want something, but they're not just saying, I want it. Just say it up front. Yeah, nothing winds me up more than that. And it's the bigger someone gets, the more of an issue it becomes, because you end up in this weird system of... So it's odd, because I'm not that big of a channel. I've kind of been in this bubble. Because of the way that I approach content, I reached a certain channel size and I sort of plateaued. I just maintain a very steady viewership. If you look at my metrics, my viewership just kind of stays the same, which is fine because it's just enough that I can pay my bills, but it isn't really very good business. But anyway, so because of Baeclast, I feel anyway that I'm sort of like elevated above my worth. It's a weird self thing, but anyway, I know how people would talk to me before Baeclast compared to after Baeclast. And because I'm so acutely aware of that, I'm very aware when I feel like someone's only talking to me because of Baeclast. Like, if another content creator is like trying to be friendly, I'm like, are you actually trying to be friendly because you're interested in being friends with me as a person, or are you just doing this because you feel like I can get you some access to GGG? And that is something which I've had to like walk the line with a few times with people. And that like paranoid sort of energy just gets bigger and bigger the larger the channel is. So if you are a small content creator reaching out to bigger people, be very clear with your intentions, be polite. If they disagree with something, as long as they're not being a jerk, try not to be a jerk back. But otherwise, I'd say just go for it. There's no harm in sending an email. That's how I've gotten most of my opportunities. Like, yeah, it's how I got the thing with Rise. It's how I originally started working with Ziggy. Likewise, if I didn't initially start that conversation with Bex, we wouldn't have then become friends. We then wouldn't have had all the GGG stuff. Recently, with having Preach on, that was a case of I sent an email to his manager being like, hey, I don't know if you know anything about Baeclast or anything, but this is the situation. The manager's like, dude, I love your stuff. I'm sure Mike would be up for it. Mike is Preach. Yeah, just ask, generally.
Yeah. One of the things that bothers me, and you can tell me if you get messages like this, I'm sure you must, but someone will message me and say, hi, I watched your video about a build.
Okay.
It didn't work. These are separate messages. I'm dying all the time. Then they send me another. Okay, so anyways, the point here is they've sent me 25 messages. I still don't know what they want. I don't know what video they watched. I don't know anything at all. And you know what? I ain't playing 20 questions with you. If you said, I'm having this specific problem on this specific build, you're going to get an answer from me. But you're not going to, if you make me pull it out of you, what the heck you even want from me? You know what I mean? Even if it's just a transactional, I don't even want to be your friend. Can you just help me with this one thing? If you give me a specific thing, I'll go, oh, well, yeah, I know that off the top of my head. Boom, answer. But I'm not going to do that with. Do you have a lot of people do that stuff to you, or no?
More so when I used to do build content. Again, I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's just a build
it's
thing.
It's you in. I find the content boring to make, but also the answering the questions. I have a very vivid thing of people used to say. I remember I made like an Oro Flicker build way back in like Prophecy or something.
Mm-hmm.
And someone was like, this build is dog shit. And I'm like, why? And he's like, I've copied it and it just doesn't work. And I'm like, can you send me your profile? He's like, sure. He sends me his profile. He's changed the ascendancy points. He's changed the passive tree. He's like wearing 0 gear with elemental damage scaling. His flasks were all wrong. And I'm like, right, so you haven't actually followed my build, have you? He's like, well, I changed 1 or 2 things. I'm like, right, okay. So you changed all the things that gave you damage scaling. And now the build doesn't do any damage and it's Flicker Strike. So you're just throwing yourselves directly at monsters, doing 0 damage, and then, yeah, they kill you. Surprising that, isn't it? A lot of the time, when you get those kinds of things, though, it's just because they lack a certain amount of game knowledge. One thing which does irritate me a lot with that, and you do get it, I'm sure you've had this, is it's those kinds of people who blatantly RMT. You'll have people being like, hey, new to the game, like first league, I'm playing your Headhunter double Cosprey's build, and I'm struggling a little bit with being squishy. And you look at their profile, and they've got like a Headhunter, they've got the 6-link Carcass Jack, they've got the 2 Cospreys, and they've got like a white helmet blast that haven't been transmuted. And you're like, right, how did you get this stuff? Oh, I got lucky. And it's like, right, okay. I mean, just say that you RMT, dude. And he's like, no. And then they get really defensive. It's like,
okay, so you're nicer than me because it seemed like you actually had a dialogue with these people, and I'm just like, we're done. We're done here. You could post to that, and maybe someone will help you, but I'm not going to extract your even question out of me.
It's often to my detriment, but I do try and engage with people, which can be very frustrating. I can give you a very recent example. So on Twitter, something you want to ask me about later, I made a couple of tweets.
Well, let's
recently.
segue into that. We can segue into that. Explain to me Twitter and start with this.
So I've made a few tweets recently that have gotten some heat. Without getting to some drama stuff, I tweeted about some Twitch stuff that's been going on, but I made a tweet about the Activision Blizzard merger that's going on. And I was kind of basically, I think I retweeted the news just as it dropped saying monopolies are lit. Because I am wary of massive corporations getting even bigger, and I generally like studios to be independent where they can be. Now, some people's reaction to that was, Tarky, obviously this isn't a monopoly because Microsoft doesn't own everything. I'm like, no, I'm not saying that this is literally a monopoly, but this is a very big step towards building a monopoly, and you don't want to be in a situation where only like 3... You don't want it to be only Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo who own everything. Like, that's not good. And I will often try and have those conversations with people when I know they fundamentally disagree on every level. They will take anything at bad faith. That they won't accept any level of nuance. And that is one of the shortcomings of Twitter, because you have a character cap. So you'll often say things which are a bit shorter. So rather than explain, for example, while I am glad that Bobby Kotick will eventually leave because of this deal, I am quite wary of Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard, because while it may not be an issue now, they own something like 30 studios. They recently bought Bethesda. Who knows what they'll buy next? Would you feel the same way if they then bought Bandai Namco? Would you then feel the same way if they then bought Capcom? Like, none of this fits into a small thing. So instead you say monopolies are lit, and people interpret it in whichever way they want. And that
which
can be irritating.
I guess is interesting overall. So how do you build up a Twitter following? Do you just start tweeting out and then people kind of find you? And why do I care about a lot of these people's thing? Like, a lot of the people that I follow are like ex-colleagues or other people, but all it seems is they either have really dumb opinions or they're tweeting out self-promotion, and that's all they do. So my entire feed of the people it's just all self-promotion. So it seems to me like, why do I want to just look through a feed that's all self-promotion and dumb stuff, where I feel if I scroll through it, I'm getting dumber? Why even be on that platform? So is there value to it somewhere of me building this? And I don't actually, the flip side, let me go a step further. I don't want to do that. I don't want to just be like self-promotion type thing as well, because I don't think I want to be a part of that and contribute to that. So if I did Twitter, what I would do is just all self-promotion stuff and then maybe answer DMs. So, okay, explain.
Right. So Twitter is very much what you make of it. Twitter can just be a self-promotion wheel or just like an echo chamber where you just follow people with the same political beliefs as you and you just retweet each other constantly. If you're doing it for that, then I don't see the value in it. So I originally started using Twitter because I realized very early on with my content creation that I'm far more interested in expressing myself than making what's necessarily considered good content. So, for example, it's that whole thing of not just making build guides. I would rather make a stupid video like, is it raining outside? Or here's just me joking around with my cat. I used to watch a lot of WoW Crendor. Like, the idea of non-content is something that's very appealing to me. It's the whole reason why I went into Baeclast originally. I have a degree in documentary filmmaking. I've sat in experimental filmmaking classes with my mother when I was like 12. Like, I kind of grew up in that like stupid video installation art sphere. Not stupid, but you know what I mean. So my whole thing was always more so, it's more valuable to me to have a meaningful connection with my audience, make content that I genuinely like, and people be more invested in me per se than, oh, he makes good build guides. And for that, Twitter is very good. So a lot of what I post on Twitter, I do tend to post quite a lot of political stuff on Twitter. I tend to post more of my own opinions and takes, stuff that necessarily wouldn't make good YouTube content or would make YouTube content which is so divisive that it would just like be very self-destructive. It's also very good for weaning out people of your audience. So, for example, when I was very vocal during the whole Black Lives Matter stuff that was going on, and whenever there is something that I care quite passionate about, I tend to be quite vocal about it. And it's whenever I would do it, I would notice I'd lose a couple of thousand subs here and there. Like, as I said, my channel's kind of been at a very steady 40-ish thousand for a while. And I really don't like the idea of there being people in my community who I would consider like pieces of shit. So, you know, if I can share some of my quite reasonable beliefs in my opinion, and it's the kind of thing that would make someone not follow me anymore, in my mind, that's a good thing. So I think Twitter's quite good from that point of view. How I originally gotten into it, I volunteer at an animal shelter once a week. So I had lots and lots of pictures of cats and animal shelters. And I was like, I'm just going to post a bunch of pictures of cats.
That's how you got a following, by posting pictures of cats? What are people's obsession with cats? See, I hate cats. I'm very allergic to cats, and that's why I hate them.
I mean, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But yeah, it's one of those things where I was just like, look, guys, if you follow me on Twitter, whenever I make like a video or do a stream, I'll tweet it out, so it's easy for you to stay on track with my content. You'll also get some nice pictures of cats, and you'll hear about my opinions and stuff. So, you know, I do quite a lot of random tweets around game dev stuff. I'll do a lot of random tweets about just kind of whatever. Every now and again, I might put some political stuff up there. And I think it's quite interesting from that point of view. The people I follow, I can tell you exactly how many I follow, but it's like 95% artists. So my Twitter feed are artists and game devs. So I follow 650 people. Very little of my feed is insert random Path of Exile streamer being like, oh, come follow my stream. I don't follow those people. I follow people who are posting cool stuff. So if I was to spend 30 minutes on Twitter, I will generally learn things because I'm following interesting indie devs, or I'll see a bunch of really cool art, which when I'm really into Dungeons and Dragons, is like, oh, this is quite inspiring. So if you use it from that point of view, it's great. And then the other thing about it, and I joke about this, is why I always tell people to follow me on Twitter, is if you're then talking to like actual like normal people who exist in the world, and you're like, oh, I've got like 40,000 people on Twitch and I've got like 40,000 people on YouTube, they're kind of like, oh yeah, I've heard of YouTube, but they don't get it. But if you're like, oh, I've got 8,000 people on Twitter, like, oh, that's a lot of people, you know. So,
but I said 40,000 on the other one.
Yeah, and they're like,
yeah, but 8,000 though.
Yeah,
that's a big number.
Yeah. So yeah, I quite like it from that point of view, and it's interesting to see kind of where people are at on that level. And it is a very good way of, if you do want to use it for networking, it is a good way of networking with other creators and stuff, because people tend to respond to Twitter DMs, I find. I very rarely DM people, it's more so I receive DMs. But yeah. Follow me on Twitter, basically.
Yeah, follow him on Twitter, guys. Come on. What are you guys doing? Follow, go.
Unless you're a dickhead, in which case don't follow me on Twitter.
Well, follow him so he gets if you're a huge dick, follow him and then unfollow him so he feels bad about himself. I think that's.
And make sure you tell me that I am.
Yeah. Before you unfollow, say I am unfollowing you. There you go. We need to know. We need to know when you're unfollowing. Okay, it's very important. What do you think of those people? I love it. I'm subscribing to your channel. Who asked, buddy? I don't care. You know what I mean?
One thing I do a lot, and if you have the time, I recommend doing it. Whenever like someone leaves you like a really like hurtful comment or whatever, I look to see who they follow. And if they follow people I respect, I'll be like, okay, shit, maybe I need to rethink my point of view on this. If they follow a bunch of people you think are dickheads, you're like, no, I made a good video. It's like a foolproof way. It's a very good way of self-censoring. Because I think that's one of the best skills you can develop as a content creator, is learning like what criticisms to take on and not to take on. And that is a very good way of kind of weaning out. So like recently when I had the whole thing with like I was talking about the Microsoft buying Blizzard, I noticed a lot of people were disagreeing with me follow Elon Musk. And I'm like, okay, I'm cool with these guys not getting my point of view.
Are you a big Elon fan? I don't know, man.
No, Elon's a prick. Anyone who before you worship Elon, anyone who worships Elon is an absolute moron, in my opinion.
Hide the painting.
Yeah, hide the Elon painting. No, there's this weird, like, it's one of the most like overused memes, but it's the Simpsons meme of like weird nerds defending Elon diving in front of the bullet.
Yeah.
There's a very big crossover in gaming circles between just like the gamers TM and people who just worship the idea of Elon Musk.
I guess I don't view people like that. I view it more as like everybody has something that you could learn from them, and I want to learn as much from different people from different point of views, and then I'll figure out what I am and how that fits my style. That's how I try to interact. So
yeah, that's
I could read, and a lot of people are very black and white. Either they hate someone or they don't like them. Just because they do one thing I disagree with, that doesn't mean anything. I could still like 50% of what they do. I still can learn stuff from them. I think that's sorely missed in the world right now.
That's a very good example of that is there's a very big YouTuber called Philip DeFranco. I don't like Philip DeFranco, but I watch his stuff because I think he makes good news. There's a lot of people who I watch because I feel like they make good content, but I don't necessarily like them as people. And I do agree. I think that is something that is missed. But at the same time, every now and again, there are some people I'm just like, no, you are scum. And,
I think it could go both ways. You could say, they're scum.
I'm sure,
but their strategy of getting their scum out is something that I probably should copy for my stuff that isn't scum, because it's very effective. Clearly, they're doing something right here, and I think if you can't do that, then you're missing out on learning a lot of things from a lot of people, even if you despise the people.
Definitely. Although I would say there's a very big difference between, like, there are quite a few people that I respect from, like, a business point of view, even though I don't particularly like them when they're self-made. Very big difference when we've gotten very off topic in your podcast when it's like, how did you start out? Oh, your dad had a diamond mine. All right, okay, small loan about $1 million.
So let me tell you about the aliens that are gonna be. Also, they're poisoning the water. Remember, I told you, I want to know this stuff, so I don't care where it goes. I'm sure someone on the planet will find this stuff interesting. So just keep going.
But yeah, that is a very good skill. I think that's a very good skill. And conversely, there are a lot of people who really dislike me, so that if people watching their stuff is disagreeing with them and they follow me, they're like, oh no, this is right. This Tarke guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. So like, it goes both ways.
I could just do the opposite of whatever Tarke said. If anyone says opposite of that, I don't know how it works, but if Tarke said it, I'm going to follow the opposite.
Exactly.
That seems like the worst strategy, but yeah,
Oh
definitely.
no, it's a great strategy.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, if that's your recommending, I
No.
suppose. Yeah. Have you thought of doing other types of content, like video essays or something that's using your film, and like making a separate channel to do different content, or
Yeah.
even
So a lot of people don't realize this. So a big reason why I make the kind of content I do zero editing, is because I'm a
Mhm.
trained editor. And I know that I would never put anything out. So when I first started making stuff, I would obsess over like it has to be perfectly edited, it has to be done a certain way. And I realized very, very quickly I would literally never upload anything. So I went with the mantra of put as few barriers as possible between my content and the upload button. I'm quite good at speaking naturally, and I can like you can randomly put me on a stage, and I might be a little bit awkward for the first minute or two, but I'll get into the flow of things. I can do one take videos quite well, so I realized, hang on, I've got quite a good skill for just doing one take videos. I'm relatively good at my point of view on things. I could either spend like 10 hours agonizing over a video, or I could just think for a few minutes, then just do a one take. I'll do that and upload it directly, and that's been working quite well for me. Now, the thing which is interesting about that is it's actually quite limiting if you're going with the philosophy I will never edit anything. And if you look, I think there's only been like 2 videos that have been edited on my entire channel, and by edited I mean a recording broke and I stitched 2 recordings together.
Some top tier editing skills. That
Yes,
film
yeah.
degree is really paying off.
But it's interesting, and I talk about this a lot. So anyone who ever went to art school have had this practice. You will be told that you need to do like a still life drawing in 30 seconds only using a stick of charcoal.
Mhm.
And at the time you're like, why am I doing this? I don't want to be doing this. This is so limiting. Um, but you're most creative trying to work around limitations. Then I also feel like that's why in the indie game space you have so much innovation, because they're having to work around either budgeting constraints, or you've got a really good programmer but no artist. And it's like, right, well, how can we try and make a game that still looks a certain way? Or vice versa, you've got a bunch of really talented artists but very little programming skill, or no budget, or this, that, and the other.
Mhm.
And when it comes to, just doing a random me talking about a patch note video, yeah, not having editing doesn't make that much of a difference. So then when it comes to like, well, how can I do this in more interesting ways? There was a whole period of time where I was doing Path of Exile videos halfway up a tree. Or like I would go down by the river and do it, or like with the raining stuff. Like when you get into those more jokey things, not doing editing something makes it way more interesting. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how I do video essays with no editing, because generally the way that game video essays work is you've got a 1 hour video. Sometimes we've got the other extreme, it's like a 10 hour. I'm currently watching a 7.5 hour video by Noah Cadwell going over the entire Resident Evil series. And he has very minimal editing. He'll have like some random montage of semi-appropriate video game footage that he's talking over. There's like Joseph Anderson with his very detailed Witcher videos, which are like 5 hours long and stuff. I really enjoyed that kind of content and think about, well, how would I do a meaningful 5 hour long video essay with zero editing? Even if you never do it, just that thought process is quite interesting.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, one thing that I do want to expand into, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for a while now, I just haven't gotten around to it, is I want to expand my podcast stuff. I want to do more one-on-one interviews with indie devs, because I feel like that's quite a mutually beneficial relationship. I've done a couple already. I did one for Sanctum Breach, which was an indie ARPG. A really nice guy, Sam. He was the dev I was interviewing for that. But yeah, the biggest issue that you have as a small dev team of either like a handful of people or a solo dev as your first project is you can make the best game in the world, people just don't know it exists. Um, I really enjoyed talking about game design. I'm a not very good hobbyist game dev. And so I have enough of a platform. I can be like, look, I've interviewed Chris Wilson, I've done all these things, I've interviewed these people.
Mhm.
Um, Let me talk to you for a couple of hours about your game. They get some promo out of it. I get an interesting conversation, upload it to channel. It seems like a very mutually beneficial thing. And it's the kind of thing that, as long as it's framed more so about game design, I feel like Path of Exile people will be receptive to it. So currently, I've been uploading a lot of Battle Brothers content on my YouTube channel because it's something that I'm very interested in, that a very, very, very small portion of my player base are interested in. My viewer base. However, saying that, if I uploaded a interview with, like, for example, the dev of that, I'm pretty sure that Path of Exile users would find that interesting just because, oh, game dev. Like, you know, I think that's like a good merger. So that is a direction I want to expand my content into.
Yeah. I'm going with a different strategy of trying to split every subsection into different channels and upload on all those. So this is here, trying to get people to subscribe specifically for that content.
I personally hate that mindset.
Interesting. Well, we'll see how successful it is. You know what I mean? It's one of those things, you try it out.
Yeah.
It might all come all back into the real James Humphrey one, but I found out that Path of Exile people only care about Path of Exile mostly. And that goes a little bit. Yeah. So I need to work on the thing that you were talking about. I need to get people to like me for me, and then they'll watch whatever, instead of liking me because I'm a robot that spits out build guides for them, right?
So to give you an example, this was a conscious decision I made, and it works. So when I first made the transition between, okay, if I'm just doing a video talk about Path of Exile, what if I just did this in the garden? I haven't done as much of them recently because the weather's been really nasty, but if you go back the last few days of my channel, there'll be lots of things where I'm just about PvE, but in the garden. Just the act of separating from just a face on a computer screen to a face in a garden is then it's like, oh, this is interesting, this is fun, people like that. So then I can do videos in the garden, talk about other things, not strictly Path of Exile. People like, oh, we like that because we like when Tarke's talking in the garden, or we like when Tarke's in a tree talking about a thing. And to a certain level, it's about like almost training your viewers, as like cynical as that sounds. And it's in much the same way with me. Like, I've been uploading a lot of Battle Brothers content. It's been getting very small viewership. But if I had a separate YouTube channel, which was just the Battle Brothers YouTube channel, that would get no views. Because my Path of Exile people would, like, if you say to someone, okay, guys, I'm making a separate YouTube channel for non-Path of Exile games because I know you're not interested in it, they'll be like, okay, cool. I'm not going to click on it because I'm not interested. If you continue,
I wouldn't position it like that. Yeah, if you say that, of course, man, of course.
But
if you say,
that is how a lot of people think about it. If you just upload it to your main channel, yes, you'll lose some people, but in my mind, did you care about those people to begin with? If someone is only willing to watch you because you're giving them the content that, like, they'll only watch for the build guides, is that really a relationship you care about? Or do you care more about the kind of people who are willing to meet you halfway? For me, I would rather focus more on people willing to meet you halfway. I have so many... every single league, I get at least 3 to 4 messages from different content creators talking about depression and burnout. Because I've been very upfront and open about how I do my content, and I don't upload stereotypical content. To my detriment, yes, but at the same time, I've been doing this for so long now, and I've been able to just about pay the bills for so long now, that it kind of works. It's the same reason why I think Baeclast has lasted as long as it has, is if there's a league where I feel like actually there's not much to talk about, we'll only do like 1 episode or 2 episodes. Whereas other podcasts will try and force an episode every 2 weeks, resentments build up between the cast, they have a big falling out, and then it completely explodes in their face. I've always tried to go, for me anyway, and this may not be the best business decision, what is the decision that will keep me somewhat sane?
All right, well, I think we're going to cut it there. Thank you for giving us all these insights on things. So make sure that you follow Tarke on Twitter. He has a YouTube. He's going to tell you about the weather. Check him out. Thank you guys for watching. Also, let us know in the comment section, what else do you want to know about Tarke? And we'll have him back on to tell us about whatever you guys are asking, huh?